Welcome into the Skraby Show, everybody. I'm Matt Skraby. Thank you for joining me tonight. It's been a good start to the week, I gotta say. I really have enjoyed doing these shows, and I'm going to continue to enjoy doing these shows. Just a little update. Tomorrow, I'm going to be out at Torrey Pines playing in the media golf tournament. I know, so fancy. But I will not be with Gwen and Chris, and there will be no Skraby Show tomorrow, but I will be back on Friday. This has been scheduled for quite a while, and so I'm not gonna pass up a chance to play Torrey South. Let me tell you, that course is awesome. Tonight on the show, we are going to do our top 3 news stories here in just a second. We're also going to talk more about Ha-Seong Kim and whether or not the Padres should look into trading him. And then in the final segment, we're going to have the Daily Gripe as well as my Super Wildcard Weekend Power Rankings. I had someone ask me for my power rankings, so there you go. Super Wildcard Weekend Power Rankings coming up at the end of the hour. And also a story that I'll get to a little bit later, but it's kind of crazy. Someone from Southern California is trying to put together a college bowl game called the Irrelevant Bowl. And it's supposed to feature 2 of the worst teams in the country in college football. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit later as well. But first, I wanted to start with this. I saw this tweet this morning, and I wanted to give a shout out to Caleb because Caleb tweeted me and said, got to the hospital during Gwen and Chris, had a baby during Matt Skraby Show, didn't sleep all night, and made it for Ben and Woods. 97.3 The Fan SD, keeping me and baby Jack going. So huge congratulations to Caleb and baby Jack. I'm sure mom as well, but I really appreciate this tweet because I'm a radio nerd, and I really like it when people introduce their kids to radio early because then maybe it will spark them into doing some more things in life. But Caleb, congratulations. I'm sorry that you're not getting any more sleep, but I think that is what you just signed up for the rest of your life. Well, at least until they're 18, I guess. But you're not going to have much sleep. So congratulations, Caleb. Thanks for listening to the station, and thanks for letting us know that our voices are on for baby Jack. That is pretty cool. Now, an update on one of the stories we had yesterday, and it would be the Cubs finalized their deal with Japanese lefty Shota Imanaga, and he agreed to a 4-year, $53 million contract. Yesterday, we didn't really have the numbers of whether or not or what he was going to make with the Cubs or if there's any deferrals or anything like that. But according to ESPN, 4 years, $53 million. The deal does have several provisions, including the team's option to extend the contract after both years 2 and 3 to $80 million over 5 years. But if the Cubs decline in either year, Imanaga can choose to become a free agent or remain in the original contract. So basically, it seems like some of these contracts are getting a little crazy and very complicated, but hey, I'm not the one who has to deal with it, so who cares? But I brought this up because the Padres have been very quiet. And so I had a couple of people ask, why weren't the Padres involved in this guy? And really, at this point, I'm just going to default to this answer is, why aren't the Padres in on this guy? The answer is because they cost too much money. 4 years, $53 million, just way too much. We all know the Padres are not going to be spending big money like that here in this offseason. So the Cubs have finalized that deal with lefty Shota Imanaga. And so they're going to get him. Also, I read an article earlier today about the Cubs being in on 1 or 2 more free agents. And we talked about this last night, but how crazy is it that the Cubs, I get it. The Cubs are a historic franchise. Chicago's cool. Wrigley Field is cool, but how are they able to pull in all of the free agents as they have? I mean, it's like the Dodgers of the Midwest. I don't really get it. The Cubs just don't scream great franchise to me over the last few years and the last maybe couple decades. But hey, a lot of these guys are going to go end up with the Cubs, and so the Padres are going to have to deal with them in the National League as well. If you want to watch on YouTube, you can just go to YouTube, type in 97.3 The Fan, and you'll see my live Skraby Show up there. The chat is there as well. If you have any questions or comments or concerns, then you can put those in the chat, and I will try to answer them as best I can. I had a pretty busy day behind the board on Gwen and Chris, so I haven't been checking my social media as much as I could, so I'm sorry if I didn't get back to anyone who had a question because, sometimes it gets overwhelming and I just have to focus on other things. But I appreciate everybody who reached out. All right, now that I've said all that, let's get into our top 3 news stories. And I'm telling you, music is on the way. I'm going to be figuring out the music tomorrow night when I'm, just getting home from Torrey Pines. So don't worry. Top 3 stories are going to have some music soon. But the number one story right now in sports would be, if you're looking at ESPN or if you're looking at any website, it's Nick Saban retiring from Alabama. Now he has 7 national titles, and so he is the most legendary coach of all time, basically in the college levels. And I saw a graphic up on TV earlier that he has one more title than Bear Bryant. So that's if you're mentioned with Bear Bryant as being a coach, being on top of him in regards to national titles, then you're doing something right. But this is going to have a ripple effect through the SEC. It's definitely going to have a ripple effect through Alabama. Immediately after Nick Saban said he was retiring, just hours after it, 5-star wide receiver Ryan Williams said he is decommitting from the Crimson Tide class. He's the number 9 overall prospect in the country, and he is the number 3 receiver in the ESPN 300 rankings. And even crazier is that he is from Alabama, and I know that they have other colleges there, but if you're from Alabama, figure if you're a good football player, you're going to go to Alabama. Williams told ESPN when they asked him, did you know that Saban was retiring? He said, I had no idea, actually. It's the dead period, and I just saw all the other players transferring or declaring for the draft. I was wondering what would happen, but I found out through Twitter that Saban was retiring. And, Nick Saban, those are the things that I'm not a fan of. And I know that he's a big-time coach, but if you have committed to coaching in 2024 and you have told these prospects that you are going to be there in 2024, then at least give them a call and tell them that you're going to be retiring, because finding out through social media is not a good way to find out. This kid, he's going to Alabama one day, and now all of a sudden he's back in the transfer portal and starting that all over again. Now, do I think that he is going to have a hard time finding a team? No, he's definitely not going to have a hard time finding a team. He'll probably just go to some other SEC team. But for one team's trash, I guess he's not trash because they didn't kick him off, but is another team's treasure. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But Nick Saban retiring after 7 national championships is a pretty big deal. Now, the second top news story of the day is something that actually legitimately surprised me. I didn't expect to see this notification when I looked at it earlier today, and it was that Pete Carroll and the Seahawks part ways. And I was surprised by that because the Seahawks have been good for a long time. They didn't necessarily have the greatest season this year, but they didn't, go 4-5 or 4-11 or 4-12 or whatever it is. 4-13 is what it is. They play 17 games. See, I'm not very good at math. But what I just don't really understand why the Seahawks would want to push him out, which is what is happening, because there were rumors and reports that the Seahawks really wanted to keep Pete Carroll really wanted to stay with the Seahawks, but the Seahawks were kind of saying it's time to move on. So Pete Carroll said he's looking forward to the future, and I'm sure that he's not done coaching yet, but he is in his 70s, and so he's someone who's going to be in high demand if he does want another job in the NFL, just because of what he did to the Seahawks. He turned them completely around before. They've been to a couple Super Bowls. They won a Super Bowl. They had some pretty legendary teams there in Seattle. So I'm very surprised that Pete Carroll was kind of pushed out by the Seahawks. And I have no idea where that franchise direction is going now, because they're going to have to figure out what they want to do at quarterback with Geno Smith. And Geno Smith, say what you want to say about him, he did have a really, really good 2022, but this year was just kind of mediocre. And so if you're the head coach coming in, you got to realize, man, I'm going to be dealing with Geno Smith as my quarterback, and maybe he's a good quarterback, but I don't think that Geno Smith is a guy who's going to win you a Super Bowl. And those guys don't grow on trees either. So don't get me wrong. I know that you can't just find a quarterback like that. I mean, a lot of the NFL has trouble finding quarterbacks, and Geno Smith is better than a lot of those. the player who's not the player who is good enough to start is going to start in the NFL. They're not going to put a player out there to start if they're not as good. So Geno Smith has to be the best quarterback on that team, but you have to think whether or not he's going to be he's going to be the quarterback of the future for the Seahawks, especially with a new coach coming in. Things change a lot in the NFL, and things change especially when your coach is fired or retires or whatever. Things change and situations change. So Seahawks are going to have to, figure out what they're going to do here in the next little bit and get a coach in place so that they can be ready for the draft. And I'm not so mad at the Seahawks having to find a new coach because, I'm a 49er fan, and the Seahawks made my 2010s a living hell, basically, because they were so good and they always beat me. You got Richard Sherman yelling at Crabtree and all that. But yeah, so Pete Carroll and the Seahawks parting ways is our second news story. Now, here's another big time story, and it has a San Diego connection. It's in the NBA. But today, the Clippers announced that Kawhi Leonard signed a 3-year, $153 million contract extension to remain with the LA Clippers. And that's great for Clippers fans because Kawhi Leonard is one of the best players in the NBA, but that is a ton of money. Sources are telling Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN the deal's going to pay Kawhi Leonard $52 million in the first year and approximately $50 million per season over the next 2 years. And apparently this does not include a player option. But you got to think, man, this is you got James Harden on the team now. You have Kawhi Leonard on the team now. Paul George is also on the team. But I would have to say that Kawhi Leonard, for me, he seems like he is often injured. He is someone who's not there all the time. He has, I know that they don't call them load management days anymore, but he has load management days that are, cutting. He's getting paid for sitting on the bench. So the Clippers had to do this, but it's a lot of money for a guy who I'm not sure how many games he's going to play for the Clippers. And he's, like I said, he's been injured. I'm trying to read through this article real quick to see if there's any games. But anyway, Kawhi Leonard, San Diego State Aztec for life, taking home a big amount of money, 3 years, $153 million. Leonard, he did have until June 30th to sign an extension with a $48 million player option for next season. And Paul George also has a $48 million player option for next season. So Clippers are about to be spending a lot of money, and they just did spend a lot of money with Kawhi Leonard. And so 3 years, $153 million. Actually, I just saw in the chat right now, this is not necessarily a top story of the day, but Eric Spoelstra, the Miami Heat head coach, he got paid as well. He got a huge contract extension, and apparently it's the biggest coaching contract in North American sports history. It's 8 years and $120 million. And if you don't know anything about Eric Spoelstra, I think you should pay attention to his story, because this is a guy who he wasn't some great professional basketball player. He worked his way up from the film room. He worked his way up all the way from watching videos with the Heat. He worked for the Heat all the way up to head coach. I honestly don't know how that happens, because it doesn't happen very often, if ever. And so Eric Spoelstra's story is something that I think you should go and check out, because it's very inspiring. And if you are sitting in a job right now and you're thinking, man, I'm never going to get to the top, well, Eric Spoelstra is an example of how you get to the top. And that's work hard, start at the lowest level, and just make connections with the right people, and you will find your way into maybe not an 8-year, $120 million extension, but I think you'll go farther in life if you give it your all, no matter what job it is. And I said that in the first night of this show, that, when I was a radio intern making no money, I took it seriously. I took it like I was being paid the most in the room. And so I was able to break through, and I was able to get in this seat, even though I was a 29-year-old intern with a bunch of 20-year-olds. So just keep your dreams, everybody, and work towards your dreams, because I don't want to say they can come true, because it's really kind of lame, but they can. I'm living proof of that. Eric Spoelstra is living proof of that as well. All right, those are the top 3 stories of the day. I'm Matt Skraby. This is the Skraby Show here on 97.3 The Fan. We're going to go to break, but when we get back, we're going to talk about Ha-Seong Kim and whether or not they should extend him, whether or not they should trade him. I'm going to tell you about which player. There's only one player with a 2023 WAR that is cheaper than Kim. So I'm going to tell you who that player is and explain a little bit more when we get back on 97.3 The Fan.
All the sports, music, news, and podcasts that you want to
You're listening to the Skraby Show here on 97.3 The Fan. I'm Matt Skraby. Thank you for joining me. We're talking about Ha-Seong Kim here in just a second. But first, I'm going to start with this because I think it's pretty important. The newest show on the station, Annie and Elston, is going to have a pretty big-time guest tomorrow. And you need to be tuned in to them tomorrow at 10:35 a.m. because they will have Padres manager Mike Shildt on the show. So their first interview with Mike Shildt, again, that's at 10:35 a.m. You can listen to him right here on 97.3 The Fan. You can listen on the Odyssey app. You could also listen on YouTube as well, or watch on YouTube as well. I actually had someone tell me, like, I because I'm a radio nerd, I've been saying nerd a lot today, and I don't know why that's in my vocabulary, but it is. But because I'm a radio nerd, I really like to hear people's listening patterns and habits. And so I asked someone not yesterday, the day before, but I asked them, what is your listening habit? How do you listen? When do you listen? And they said that they usually listen to the show after the show's already done. But what they have been doing is going on YouTube and starting the Gwen and Chris YouTube show, and then kind of listening to that. And if they want to watch, they could watch, but they could also minimize the YouTube on their phone, and they can close the phone so that you can still hear it. There's a lot of good stuff about YouTube. And so that's what they do. They go back and forth from watching to listening as they're picking up their kids, or if they're walking the dog or something like that. So if you are looking for different ways to consume our station here, 97.3 The Fan, you can just go on YouTube, make sure you watch all of our shows, go subscribe to the 97.3 The Fan YouTube page, and you will see all of those live broadcasts each and every day. There's 4 of them now. We got Ben and Woods, we got Annie and Elston, we got Gwen and Chris, and now we got the Skraby Show. So thanks to everyone who has joined me in the chat room and on YouTube and everywhere else. I appreciate that. Now, with that out of the way, 10:35 a.m. Mike Shildt with Annie and Elston. I was walking around the room, and I'm going to shake that because you need to hear it. But I was walking around the room, and I know that Ben and Woods did something this morning called I can't remember what they called it, but it was all about these jelly beans. And these jelly beans are jelly bean roulette, I think is what they called it. And so on the top, I have never seen this before, but one stuck out to me, and I know that Ben got dead fish this morning, which sounds disgusting, but one of them is supposed to either be a pomegranate one or an old bandage. Now, my first question is, how does someone know what an old bandage tastes like? I just don't really understand how they would know that. So I would not want to get one, and I'm not going to eat one of these because I'm by myself in here and I don't want to be so grossed out I can't talk anymore. But there's one that says birthday cake or dirty dishwater. That's disgusting. Also, there's one that says peach or barf. That is disgusting. So, I'm going to put these back over here, but that is kind of gross. Great idea from Jelly Belly. When I was a kid, actually, I lived near the Jelly Belly factory, and I got to go on a field trip to the Jelly Belly factory. It was pretty awesome, I gotta say. It was, it was one of those things where you have no idea how something's made, and then you walk into a big factory, and you just realize that there are billions of jelly beans around you. It was pretty awesome, I gotta say. They had all those things in the lobby where they had all the different tubes full of every flavor of jelly beans. Anyway. No one's tuned in to hear about my Jelly Belly story from when I was a kid. All right. So Ha-Seong Kim, we've been talking about him all day, and I want to put up a tweet real quick, or an X or YouTube comment real quick on the stream. And Trevor says his trade value is so high, but I don't want to lose him. I understand that, Trevor. I definitely understand why you don't want to lose him, because he's a valuable player. But at the same time, Juan Soto was a valuable player, and let me just start this whole conversation with, I do not want to trade Ha-Seong Kim unless they get some insane package back, but I don't see anything that insane coming back for Ha-Seong Kim. But I don't want to trade him, number one, because Manny Machado is going to be injured for the first part of the year next year, and he can't play in the field, so they're going to need someone like Ha-Seong Kim who can move around to the different spots and they can move around to the different spots in the infield, and he can handle each spot in the infield. And he's making $8 million coming up this year. That's a steal for a player like him. And I teased before the break, there's only one player with a better WAR and cheaper than Kim, and that guy is Gunnar Henderson. He plays for the Orioles. He, had a great, I think it was his rookie year, or at least his second year, but he's a younger player, and he had just a little bit higher of a WAR than Ha-Seong Kim, and Gunnar Henderson is definitely a lot cheaper because he's on his pre-arbitration deals. But if you're looking for a guy who can do basically anything you need him to do except for play the outfield and catcher, then and you're looking for a guy who's going to be a good leader on your team, $8 million is a no-brainer for this team. And they're getting so much more value out of Ha-Seong Kim than the $8 million that he signed for is around baseball. $8 million buys you a bench player. Ha-Seong Kim is much more than a bench player. He's much more to this team than a bench player. So as long as a team doesn't just blow the doors off AJ Preller and give him some high prospects or give him some major league ready players, I just don't see the benefit in moving Ha-Seong Kim right now. I really don't, because he's too valuable to this team. And also, you can't trade him before they go to Korea. I got to call it. They have to have Ha-Seong Kim on the Padres when they go to Korea to open the season, but you cannot trade him this year. Kim's the answer for when Manny is not able to play third and you need him. So I'm hoping that the Padres, we talked about it earlier, these are tough decisions that we don't have to make, and we're happy about that. But it seems like a no-brainer to me to keep him on the team because of how much he's getting paid and how much he's contributing to the team. He was in the top 15 of WAR last year. That's pretty insane. He was the first Padre in WAR last year, and I got to think that he's just going to continue to get better, and that's what he did over the first 2 years. He got better from year one to year two, and year two to year three. So I think that Ha-Seong Kim is someone I want to hold on to. It's kind of like fantasy sports, where maybe it's not like fantasy sports, but here's how I feel about it. So when you have a player that is good, but they're not great, they're not like a superstar player, but you just feel like they're going to blow up and they're going to start to become a superstar player. And so you kind of hang on to them and you don't trade them to anyone else because you think they're going to become this big superstar. I don't think that Ha-Seong Kim is going to be like a super, super duper star, but I think Ha-Seong Kim has proven to all of us that he can get better, and he has gotten better over the last couple of years. And I don't know why you would want to go away from that. And again, the caveat is that a team offers you something so good that you just can't say no. But again, I don't see a team doing that. And especially with Ha-Seong Kim only with 1 year left on his contract, or 2 years left on his contract. I think it's a mutual option next year, 2025 mutual option. But I just don't see the benefit in moving a guy like that right now. I also had another comment about Jake Cronenworth, and actually, let's go back to Trevor. Trevor said, "My heart says that HSK, Tatis, and Musgrove are forever untradeable and have to retire as Padres." I believe Fernando Tatis Jr. is probably going to retire as a Padre because he's under contract for a very long time. And I believe that Joe Musgrove has a chance of retiring as a Padre for sure. But what I saw in the chat was a comment about Jake Cronenworth and the deal that he got and how that's kind of coming back to bite the Padres. So before last season, before the Fan Fest, Jake Cronenworth signed a 7-year, $80 million contract. The actual contract did not kick in until this coming season. So he's going to be making his yearly cash this year is $9 million. And I am a Jake Cronenworth fan because of his durability. He plays a ton of games. He played, he broke, he had an unfortunate injury at the end of last year, so I'm not going to count that against him. But in 2022, he played 158 games. In 2021, he played 152 games. And in 2020, he played 54 games out of 60. So he's extremely durable. He's able to play multiple positions. The one problem I think with Jake Cronenworth and how much money they paid him is that he has regressed each year at the plate. And so in 2020, in that short season, in his breakout year, he was incredible. He had 285 batting average, an OPS of 831. He had a 129 OPS plus, and the reason I bring up OPS plus is because it's really easy to figure out how good a player is if you look at OPS plus. Anything that's if you're 100, you're an average player. 100 to 200, you're above average player. So 129 OPS plus is above average player. So he was good that year. And then in 2021, he had an OPS plus of 122. His batting average slipped down to 266, but his OPS stayed up there at 800. And then in 2022, he ended up hitting 239 with an OPS of 722 and an OPS plus of 109. These are declines each and every year. And I'll bring up last year. Last year he hit 229 and his OPS was 689 and his OPS plus was 92. So if you're looking at it in regards to OPS plus, that was the worst year of his career last year. It was not what he wanted. It was not what we wanted. And we all thought he was going to be better last year. The whole team struggled. So let me just say that as well. The whole entire team was struggling. And so I can't just place it all on Jake Cronenworth. But when you sign a guy to a contract before the year, and then he has a year like he did last year, makes me a little nervous about what's going to happen throughout the duration of the contract. So this year, his cash is $9 million. 25, his cash is $11 million. And then for the rest of his career, 2026 through 2030, it's $12 million. That's a lot of money for a guy who's hitting 229, I think is what I said for last year. And again, this isn't a knock on Jake Cronenworth. It's just it's the facts. It's the numbers that he's providing me. And I think Jake Cronenworth can be a lot better, and he has been a lot better. But when you're 30 years old and you're starting your first year of a 7-year contract for $80 million, you got to think twice about that one. And he's going to be under contract with the team until 2030 when he's 36 years old. How much is he going to be producing when he's 36 years old and he's making $12 million? No one knows that, but I'm a little nervous about what's going to happen with the Jake Cronenworth year, and I hope that he bounces back. The Padres need him to bounce back in a huge way. But Jake Cronenworth is he's a good player on this team. He's a leader on this team. The clubhouse like him, the fans like him, but he needs to be better at the plate this coming season, or else Padres are going to struggle. I mean, runners in scoring position was not good. We know that. 1-run games, not good. We know that. And there were some opportunities I remember Jake Cronenworth having that could have won the game or at least put the Padres up front. And I know that he's not going to do it every time, but yeah, I think there has to be a little bit more from him than there was the last 3 seasons. And especially there has to be a lot more from him than there was last year in 2023 when he only hit 229. Padres have a lot of decisions to make. Again, we've said this a million times on the show. They have a ton of decisions to make, and it's coming up to it's coming up now to spring training. Spring training is going to be around 5 weeks away. Still need 2 outfielders. Still need to fill out that rotation. Maybe 1 or 2 more bench pieces. There's still a lot of work to go, but I do think AJ Preller can pull a rabbit out of his hat, and he has. And so I'm looking towards to see what he can do. I know that AJ is not going to stop until he feels like he has a team that's going to compete. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that comes together over the next 5 weeks or so, 5 to 6 weeks. But things have to get popping, as they say. I'm not cool enough to say popping, but I just did on the radio. I'm Matt Skraby. This is the Skraby Show here on 97.3 The Fan. When we get back from break, we're going to be talking about that irrelevant bowl that I told you about in the beginning of the show. And then I'm also going to give my daily gripe and my super wildcard weekend power rankings. All of that is next on the Skraby Show on 97.3 The Fan.
Quinn and Chris on The Fan.
So then I get to make the U-turn. Now I'm going back to
Matt Skraby back with you here in the Odyssey Palace, 97.3 The Fan. The Skraby Show. One more segment to go. Thanks to everybody who's joined me tonight. I apologize because I didn't realize that I haven't been looking at the phones, and I saw someone call in, and I apologize for that. I'm going to have to do better at looking at the phones while I'm doing this as well. Now, I have to talk to Dan real quick, who's on the YouTube chat. If you want to follow our station, go to YouTube, 97.3 The Fan. But Dan on the YouTube chat has said that my jacket that I'm wearing or pullover that I'm wearing makes me look like Spock. And at first I was like, what makes me look like Spock? And then I looked at it in the camera and I kind of do look like Spock. Now, this is what I got back a couple years ago when I went to go play the Torrey Pines Media Day. So it's a pretty nice golf shirt, golf pullover, but I guess I'm not going to be wearing this anymore on the camera because I don't want to look like Spock. But Dan, pretty spot on, Dan. Pretty spot on. I also have to thank Dan for being my camera guy, basically, because I keep forgetting to turn the camera off when we go to break. And Dan keeps saying, Skraby camera. So appreciate you, Dan. Want to shout out Anthony in the chat. Want to shout out Charisma in the chat. Trevor, Flanders, C20, M. McKee 23, all of you are in the chat, and I really appreciate you for joining me tonight. Now, the bowl game called the Irrelevant Bowl, which kind of sounds fun, but at the same time, it's just basically making fun of bad football teams. So this bowl is proposed by a Newport Beach, California-based promoter named Roy Engelbrecht. He is saying the game would feature a pair of college football teams that are either winless or close to it. Here is his press release, or what he said in a press release. No polls, no rankings, no controversy, just two winless or near winless teams looking for redemption in one elusive win. Knowing that the NCAA has become more flexible with the number of teams wins to qualify for a bowl, I will petition the NCAA asking them to grant a waiver in 2024 so that two teams would be eligible to play in the inaugural Irrelevant Bowl. Now, Brett McMurphy of the Action Network immediately said there's no chances this is going to happen because the NCAA does not want to highlight how bad two teams are. Honestly, I think it's a fun idea. I really do. I get why the NCAA wouldn't be on board with this, but I definitely think the NCAA shouldn't be on board with this because you are glorifying and kind of making fun of two teams that are not very good. But I do think this would be kind of entertaining to have two winless teams go at it at the end of the season trying to get their first win. I definitely think that would be fun. There's entertainment value to that. Now, would it be good football? I have no idea, and I doubt it would be good football because they're winless teams. But when two winless teams get together, when two bad football teams get together, doesn't that mean there's going to be a good game because they're both bad? I don't know. That's just how my brain works. But the Irrelevant Bowl is not going to be coming to the college football playoff anytime soon. NCAA has shut that down. You would think that the NCAA would want the Irrelevant Bowl because it's just another opportunity to make a bunch of money. Brian on the chat, most of these bowls are irrelevant already. The opt-out bowls. Hey, you know what? I'm not in disagreement with that whatsoever. I mean, after what we saw with Florida State playing Georgia in I think it was the Orange Bowl, that was ridiculous. It wasn't even a competition. It was not fair to the people who actually played. All right, Skraby here with you on the Skraby Show. Switching over now to my Super Wildcard Weekend Power Rankings. And I got to say, a couple years ago when they put these Super Wildcard Weekend when they put the Super Wildcard Weekend together, I wasn't so sure about it, but then I saw it. In the last couple of years, the Super Wildcard Weekend have been great. There have been some great finishes. There have been some great storylines. So for this specific power ranking, I'm going to be taking the two bye teams out of it, and I'm going to be starting with the teams that are playing this weekend. And at the bottom, I believe it would be the 12th team. Let me see, the 10th team would be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And the only reason I say that they're the 12th team or 10th team is because they have not been able to score lately. Baker Mayfield is hurt. Mike Evans is good, but they just don't seem like a team that's going to be ending up winning winning one playoff game, let alone or winning it. Let me start that over. They just don't seem like a team that's going to be able to score points enough to win a playoff game. And so I have the Bucks at the number 10 spot in the power rankings. The number 9 spot in the power rankings is the Steelers. Now, the Steelers, I am very surprised that they got to 10 wins on the year because for all you fantasy football people out there, Najee Harris was not good. He was on my bench most of the year. I drafted him to play, but he just didn't seem like the Steelers were doing good things all year. But yet they make the playoffs, but they come in at my number 9 spot because they don't have a quarterback. I know Mason Rudolph's been playing okay the last couple of weeks, but the Mason Rudolph thing, he's gonna regress at some point, and I feel like it's gonna be in the playoffs this weekend. Also, you never know what George Pickens is gonna give you, and also J.J. Watt on the defensive side is already out for the Steelers, so they're my 9th team. 8th team, I hesitate to put them all the way down at 8, but the Eagles. And it's because they've been playing so bad coming into the playoffs. They're 1-5 in their last 6 games. But the thing about the Eagles is that all they need to do is just turn it around for one game, and I feel like their winning ways will come back. You just need to get a win to have a little bit of mojo, and if the Eagles are able to beat the Bucks on Monday night, then they'll have that little bit of mojo, and they'll be into the second round of the playoffs. The Eagles are just not a team that I think I want my 49ers to play, just because you never know what is going to happen with a team like that. Now, the Eagles defense is very bad right now. A.J. Brown's banged up, but I'm going to put them at my number 8 spot because of how they finish the season. I can't put them at any higher when you finish the season 1-5 and you back your way into the playoffs. But they're a dangerous team, and I would not want to see them in the playoffs. Number 7 team, the Texans. C.J. Stroud has been incredible this year. D'Amico Ryan has been incredible this year as a first-year head coach. Texans just seem like they are – the Texans seem like that team that didn't have any expectations coming into the year. They started playing well, and then they ended up finding themselves in the playoffs. And those are also dangerous teams because teams that are playing with house money at this point tend to play a little bit looser, tend to not worry as much about mistakes and things like that. And so – I could see the Texans winning a game in the playoffs. I can. And I could see them just being loose enough and having enough fun to move on, is what I'm trying to say. Move on. But Texans, 7th team. Chris is not going to like this, but I have the Dolphins at number 6. And the reason I have the Dolphins at number 6 is because they are playing, their defense is banged up a lot. They have a lot of injuries. Xavier Howard, I don't think, is going to play over the weekend. Bradley Chubb was out a couple weeks ago. And number one, the weather is going to be terrible, too. It's going to be freezing. We talked about on the show earlier. It's going to be 0 degrees there in Kansas City. And the Dolphins are from Miami, if you didn't know. Miami's pretty hot, and it usually stays, warm year-round. But their offense and Tua, I just don't know that Tua has what it takes right now to lead a comeback victory, lead a game-winning drive. And Tyreek's also been hurt. He's not going to say it, but he has been hurt. Dolphins are coming into the playoffs at the wrong time in their season, so they're number 6. The number 5 team, the Chiefs. The Chiefs have been up and down all season long. But I have to put them at number 5 because Patrick Mahomes is a playoff genius. I don't even know if that's a thing, but he is really, really good in the playoffs. He knows how to win. I mean, he's been to a bunch of Super Bowls. He's won Super Bowl MVP a couple times. Patrick Mahomes knows what he's doing, and you can never count out Patrick Mahomes. You can never count out Travis Kelce. And so I think the Chiefs are the number 5 team, and I think that they're going to beat the Dolphins on Saturday night. I'm sorry, Chris, but I think that's what's going to happen. You may be thinking, hey, where are the Packers? You can't have them any higher, and you're right. I can't have them any higher, and most people probably think I should have them lower, and I told the guys on the show that the Packers are the team that I'm kind of worried about in the NFC because they're that team that comes in and kind of is middling throughout the year, and then all of a sudden they catch fire, win 3 of their last 4 games, head into the playoffs, and it kind of reminds me I guess it doesn't remind me so much of the teams and themselves, but it kind of reminds me of the situation for the New York Giants when they won their 2 Super Bowls. They weren't overwhelmingly great teams, those 2 teams that won the Super Bowl, but they got into the playoffs. They were hot, and they ended up winning the Super Bowl. So that can happen. And the Packers, if the Packers, have played the 49ers so many times in playoff history, and the Packers have won so many times in playoff history, it's just one of those things I just don't want to see. Don't want to see it. And I know that there's other teams in the NFC, but another team, or I guess, another team that I wouldn't want to see as well in the playoffs would be the LA Rams. Rams are playing great football right now. Sean McVay might even deserve Coach of the Year. A lot of people predicted, I went back to some of the predictions, and a lot of people predicted that the Rams are going to be in the bottom 20, from 25 to 32 in the power rankings when the year started. But Rams are looking strong right now. I feel like Matthew Stafford's going to go to Detroit, and he's going to prove that he's the best of that trade between him and Jared Goff. And so the Rams are the number 3 team on the list. The number 2 team by default is the Buffalo Bills. And I say by default because they're the number 2 seed. I can't really put them any lower because they did end up making it into the playoffs. But if I was going to put them a lot lower, it would be because of Josh Allen. Josh Allen turns over the ball a ton. And if you turn over the ball in the playoffs, you're most likely not going to win the game. And most of the time in the regular season, if you turn over the ball a lot, you're not going to win. Josh Allen against the Dolphins on Sunday turned the ball over a ton, throwing bad passes. And if he does that this weekend, him and his team are going to be exiting the playoffs early. And it will be a lot of heartache for those Buffalo Bills fans having another year end early because, Josh Allen is just too careless with the ball. So the Bills are the number 2 team. And the Cowboys are the number 1 team. It pains me to say it because I have a feeling I'm going to have a DM on Twitter or X when I get off the show because there's one person who loves to talk to me about the Cowboys, and they're going to hold this over my head forever. Remember that one time you had the Cowboys number 1 on the list? Just hurts me to do so. Just hurts me to do so. So here's the list one more time: Bucks, Steelers, Eagles, Texans, Dolphins, Chiefs, Packers, Rams, Bills, and the best team in this weekend's playoffs will be the Cowboys, in my opinion. Man, these shows go so incredibly fast. I gotta say, I don't ever expect to look at the clock and see that I only have a minute left. So my daily gripe for today is, usually these daily gripes are going to come up from something that happened to me earlier in the day or earlier in the week. And so this is what happened when I went through the self-checkout at Vons today. My daily gripe is, there's a sign. If you have over 15 items, you should not go through the self-checkout. You should go through the other checkouts where people can help you and they can put the items in the bag. I saw someone with a full cart of stuff pull up to the self-checkout, knowing this is going to take about 20 minutes or so. And the person who was working the self-checkout at Vons didn't say anything. And so I just had to stand there while I was waiting for someone to be done. It just kind of irked me a little bit. It annoyed me a lot of bit that this person had, I would have to say, I started counting the items, but I stopped counting because I thought I was being too crazy at that point. But I would have to say there's over 30 items. Sand Cactus Man says, Vaughn's shopping fancy. I don't think it's fancy, but it's just what's next to work. So I had to stand in line for that. But I don't know if anybody else feels like me. The whole self-checkout thing is great. I love doing the self-checkout. I love being able to scan my own stuff. But I don't love when people take 50, 60, 70 items through the self-checkout. That's my daily gripe for today. Thank you for listening. And if you have daily gripes, if you have something you want me to talk about, message me at Matt Skraby on Twitter, at Matt Skraby on Instagram, at Matt Skraby on Facebook. Please, please, please tell me your daily gripes. I love to talk about these things because then there's lots of commonalities out there with gripes. All right, that's it for today's Skraby Show. Appreciate you all listening. Appreciate you all being on the chat and all of you out there listening on your ride home from work. I will not be here tomorrow night. I'm going to be playing at Torrey Pines. I will not be here tomorrow during the show. So it's going to be Gwen and Chris without me, but I will be back on Friday for Gwen and Chris and the Skraby Show. So until then, have a good night. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. Talk to you on Friday.
Gwen and Chris on the Fan.
We get to the back half of the week. Skraby's out. Chris LON. Plus, we'll have Gwen and Chris Pick'em playoff edition.
Listen to Gwen and Chris weekdays from 2 to 6 on 97.3 The Fan.